Well, what am I going to do? That Kirk Cameron guy, the one that, was defending Christmas a few years ago. My nemesis made up birthday. But what am I going to do about this? Well, he's given me some good publicity. I haven't had that much publicity since, Dante's Inferno. How am I going to play on this? I know, I'll do a grudge match. I'll call up my boy Hellboy, and that'll be Hellboy versus Kirk Cameron. And that ought to sell real good. But I better not tell people there's something worse than hell. And y'all watch out, that EC channel guy, he just might. So I'm got to see what I'm going to do here. I hope you liked our interesting little introduction to the subject of hell. Was fun, I hope. Well, here's the whole deal. Kirk Cameron stepped into a pile of hell on a question and answer program done by his son. And every Christian commentator has taken up that, I guess it's racking up video views on YouTube. Quite controversial a subject. And his position seemed to indicate something that rattled the hellfire and brimstone preachers. So they took out after him. And of course, the ones that are not so much hellfire and brimstone in the Christian community are defending him. And I guess he's got some friends defending him. What he really believes, I don't know. But instead of me worrying about what Kirk Cameron believes, that's why we're going to call this the match between hell, oh boy, and Kirk Cameron. Because let's look at what the scriptures, the Bible, has to say about the subject, rather than just watching videos and figuring out who's right. Y'all stay tuned as we dive into this. And if you stay till the end, we're going to tell you about something worse than hell. Anyhow, let's get going. Well, here we go. Just like I said, we're going to look at what the Bible says about hell. If you had a King James Bible and you looked up the word hell and used the Strong's number, it would tell you that hell appears 31 times in the King James Version. But there's a problem. The Hebrew word that's translated hell those 31 times is also translated grave 30 times, and pit 3 times, and graves plural 1 time. So which is it? The word is Sheol, Sheol, and if you look up the definitions, well, it's the place of the dead, it's the underworld, it's the world of gloom and dreariness and darkness, and all these explanations that get attached to it later on. But the root meaning of the word Sheol or Sheol is to ask, to or inquire, or to beg sometimes. It's the place of questions, maybe with no answers. When we look at the first place in some Bibles it gets translated hell, in Genesis chapter 37, it's Jacob mourning for the loss of his son Joseph, and he uses the word, he went to Sheol. We don't know Jacob's theology. I'm sure it's not, all flushed out like the Reform guys would like. So maybe they don't think Jacob's going to be in heaven. I disagree. Anyhow, that's a rabbit. What about me, a good old Texas boy that doesn't read Hebrew hardly at all? I'm better at it. Or Greek very much at all. Which is it? Is it a grave? I know what a grave is. It's a hole in the ground that you bury somebody and put dirt over them. But there's another Hebrew word for grave that's also has to do with a burial spot, and it's a different word. We might touch on that in just a little bit. But which is it, translators? Because the preachers take off with the hell, and they never tell you that it's the same Hebrew word that's translated grave or hell. And we have this whole concept of hell in our minds that's been pounded into us for centuries. The hellfire and brimstone guys, you don't want to go there, In fact, the universal church system made a fortune selling indulgences to keep you out of hell. That's the reason Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door and started the whole Reformation thing. was selling tickets to get out of hell free. It's like religious monopoly, a get out of jail free card. But when you got a word here that gets used two different ways, and English speakers don't know the root, and their pastors either don't know the root or don't tell them because they have an agenda, maybe well-meaning, they want to keep you out of a bad place. But how do we get there? Well, let's look at something. I got a book here about mythology, show you both sides of it. It goes into depth on all the different, what are called pagan mythologies. If you want to learn about who hell is and Hades is and all these gods and goddesses, that was what the ancient world was full of, other than the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Hebrews. The pagans know that. Most people don't know it today. What's my point is? Well, the word hell comes from the goddess of the underworld in Norse mythology called Hel. That's what her name was, spelled Hel, or Hela. She was the sister of Loki. Y'all remember Loki, Thor, Marvel Comics, all that whole story. They did a real good movie where Loki and Thor team up to fight the sister Hela, who's trying to take over Asgard. Sure, a lot of you saw that, but what's the whole point here? The whole point is the Norse mythology follows the Greek mythology. Why do I say that? Because when the Jews had the Hebrew Tanakh, or Old Testament, translated into Greek. It started with the 5 books of Moses called the Torah or the Law, and eventually the rest of the Old Testament in Alexandria, Egypt. They chose the Greek word Hades to translate Sheol into. Well, Hades has a whole different connotation, folks. In Hades, according to mythology, oh, by the way, Hades is the brother of Zeus. We won't get into all the Greek mythology, and he gets to rule the underworld while Zeus gets to rule the upper world. And in Hades, you have 2 compartments. One's called Elysian Fields and Tartarus. So we get that interesting. In the New Testament, we get a Hebrew word that goes into Greek called Gehenna or Gehenom. That's another subject we'll kind of touch on here in a little bit. But Israel coming out of Egypt, which had a robust afterlife belief system, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you can look up all that. In fact, here several years ago, the archaeologists in Egypt found, I think, a fully preserved scroll, 52 pages or folios, on prayers, incantations, chants. The Egyptians had this whole get to the right side of the afterlife, heaven, or their concept of heaven, with prayers, incantations, and yet the Torah given on Mount Sinai through Moses doesn't give you prayers, incantations, things to do to get out of hell and into heaven. Did the Most High Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, did the Most High forget this important subject? Was his theology not well thought out? I doubt that, because the focus of the Torah was not to get to heaven, it was to bring heaven to earth. But anyhow, let's go on in this subject as we look more. Okay, moving on in the subject. Like we said, I said there was another Hebrew word. You'll find that one reference to it is in Genesis 35:20, speaking of Jacob again, where he buries Rachel or Rachel, his wife. And the word in English, grave, there, remember we said that Sheol is also translated grave and hell. But here, the word is not Sheol, it's Kibarah. So, why didn't they just use Kibarah? Why different? That might be the subject of a deeper study if you're interested. But the point is, it's a grave. The English speaker doesn't know the difference between Sheol and Kibarah. The Hebrew speaker does, and most of your preachers don't tell you. Sadly, I met a guy one time that actually had a PhD, a doctorate in theology, and thought I'd ask him something about Hebrew. I figured he had a doctorate. He knew nothing. Yet I know guys that don't have a doctorate that speak fluent Hebrew and read biblical Hebrew and biblical Aramaic. Strange thing there. But like I said, we've got this whole thing there of what does it mean. Now we're going to slide into the New Testament more to look at some terms that we had talked about. But we've covered the gods and goddess thing. And like I said, if you want to know more, I'll hold it up here next to my face. You can get you a copy and read all about mythology. Prefer you study your Bible. eSword's free, by the way. You can learn a lot on the program. You don't have to pay any money for. You can give them a donation. And I don't make any money off that. But we have the word Gehenna or Gehinnom. Gehenna or Gehinnom is a place called the Valley of Hinnom from the sons of Hinnom. It became a place that ancient Israel burned their children as sacrifices and abandoned the Most High, Yah, in favor of Baal and Molech and things like that, and did horrible things in. By the time you get to Yeshua or Jesus's time, it's a place where they burn the garbage and they cremate bodies that have been crucified or bodies they find. And so it's a smelly, nasty place. This is where Yahushua himself, Yeshua the Messiah, talks about Gehenna, and it gets translated hell. Well, it's a nasty place. It doesn't mean the stuff just burned and never burned up, because it would have been really bad. It was bad enough if you had your job was to do that. But it's the place that where things are unclean. So you get the word Gehenna, Gehinnom, that gets translated hell, and most people don't realize that. They just see the word hell in their English Bible. We're going to end up with Tartaru. And remember what I said, that's only used a few times, but hell has Elysian fields in Tartaru. And in that Greek mythology, the bad guys go to Tartaru, the good guys go to Elysian fields. The same way in Norse mythology. You have compartments like Valhalla, where everybody, all the good Vikings and Norsemen, the day get to. I said we're going to put a bow on it, and we surely are. We're going to give you what I promised to deliver to you, the thing worse than hell. Well, to deliver on my promise, I said if you stayed to the end, I'd read you something from the Bible about something that's worse than hell. I think people get this confused with hell because they don't know how to read their Bible correctly. But I'm going to keep my promise, and this is the one thing that we know for sure what it says. So I want to look at this, putting a bow on this whole thing. We could do a deeper dive study into this whole subject of the afterlife, but I don't want to get too long-winded in this video. And I hope Kirk gets his mind figured out what he believes and why. If you have a Bible, go to Revelations chapter 20, and let's read verses 11 and 14. I'm reading from the Institute for Scriptural Research 2009 edition. And it says, "And I saw a great white throne, and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and heavens fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne. And books were opened, and another book was opened, the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works," not according to their theology, according to their works, it says. "And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. And death and Sheol, or hell, or Hades, depending on your translation, gave up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, each one according to his works. And death and Sheol, or hell, were thrown into the lake of fire." So there's something worse than Sheol and hell and Gehinnom. There's the lake of fire. You don't have to go there. If you're worried about fire and flame, maybe you get totally burnt up there. That's called the annihilation doctrine, and that's what people think Kirk has come to believe. And there's the eternal torment side. Why take a chance either way, whether you get burned up or eternally tortured? Why don't you spend eternity on a new heaven and a new earth with Yeshua and the Father? Don't worry about hell and Sheol. Worry about the lake of fire. You don't want to go there. You don't have to go there. You have a choice. What are your works like? Are they wicked and ungodly? Are you living for yourself? Are you steeped in pagan practices? calling it Christianity or maybe pure paganism. I don't know. Anyhow, that's it. Something worse than Sheol or hell, the lake of fire. Stay out of it, my friend. Thank you for viewing to this point. Talk to you soon.